Hi, welcome to the Grendhill Chronicles Podcast. If you follow my podcast, for all of my fan out there, because there's probably one of you, thanks, Mom. So for anybody who may happen to be following my podcast, whether on YouTube or Spotify or Apple, wherever, you might wonder where in the world I've been for the last year and a half that I haven't published any episodes. And you might also be wondering what is with this shirt. Well, it's comfy. I like it, and I've actually had it since high school, which was a long time ago. But like, where have I been? I mean, life happens. I have a full-time job. I have a wife and 3 kids, and I've been really busy, and I haven't had time to dedicate to this project. So yeah, I've kind of made a format for self-interview here. I'm looking at my questionnaire on the screen. And this will be a shorter podcast episode, I think. I'm not going to be telling any story on this episode, and I'm not going to be really getting into the how-to. No, I take that back. Not how-to, but the making of. I will be getting into the making of a little bit. So, you might wonder if you're... You might wonder... So you might wonder when there will be more podcast episodes. Well, here's one right now. But, I mean, what can I say? I do them when I can, and they'll come. I love the Clarion Neat podcast. I know, it's nerdy. From a dude named Sean Perrin. And I found it back when it was fairly new. I think I actually found it during its second season. I think I found it in 2017. But it didn't have a huge backlog. And actually, there was a problem with Google Podcasts at that time. On my phone, it just wasn't drawing up all the episodes. Anyway, so I refound it last year. Or maybe it was late 2020, I refound it and I started binging it. And it took me a long time to get through it. And then in October of 2021, I caught up. And he just published a new episode last week. And I was so happy to see that notification on my phone that he had a new episode. I haven't listened to it yet, so I hope he doesn't announce that he's closing up shop on his podcast. But, I mean... It happens. Sometimes time gaps happen. Mine happens to have been about a year and a half since my last episode was published. Longer than that, actually. Sorry if you're listening to any of the background noise on this. There's my car running with the garage door open because I'm watching the kids and they are still asleep. Yeah, maybe you hear some birds, but yeah, more episodes will come, and I have old audio, old conversations with my cousin Sam, and actually one with my sister Julianne, and I have the audio, and I started editing one last week. I have a newer computer than I did a year and a half ago, and this one is a lot faster, so I won't be sitting here waiting for the computer to catch up. Okay, now if you actually read the web novel on thorn.link/Grendhill, you might be wondering, are there any more chapters to the Chronicles of Grendhill? The Grendhill... So question number 3, if you follow the story, if you read the web novel on thorn.link/Grendhill, you probably don't have a habit of it because there hasn't been anything new in a while. So you might be wondering, are there any new chapters to the Grendhill Chronicles? In my mind, yes. Written out, no. So it'll get there. And question 4, what other projects do I have? I have too many projects to handle, but they're all in the nascent stage. Just very barely beginning. I have several stories I don't know if they're going to turn out to be short stories or if they're going to be turn out to be novels or novellas. Time will tell when I get a chance to write them. As far as other projects, I mean, up here, this is 3D printing garbage. This is filament from failed prints, or maybe it's just the support and whatnot from other prints. And I'm bringing up my 3D printing habit or hobby for a reason. One second. So I printed this. It's a chessboard. It's not done yet because it needs the wire to hold the two halves together. Oh, you can't see it. This chessboard needs a wire to hold the two halves together at the hinge. But yeah, I printed all this on my 3D printer, and I 3D printed chess pieces as well. I have yet to paint half of those. Just like I've painted half of the squares, I need to paint half of the chess pieces. But yeah, I mean, I printed out a little, and unfortunately I left it on my desk at work. But I printed out a little, I don't know what to call it, a little relief print of like a relief sculpture of the Thallon Rose. If you go to thorn.link/Grendhill, you see the Thallon Rose drawing up in the upper left corner. So I mean, that was just kind of a test print for my own information. And while my drawing and 3D model are somewhat limited and not the best, the print itself turned out well. So I dream one day maybe I can be printing little models related to my stories. So that's a somewhat related project. It's not another fiction project, but I have some other fiction projects. So I am conceiving some stories within the Grendhill universe. There's this one place I want to call Stain, or The Stain, where the name might be counterintuitive at first, but the explanation will come in that story when it's told, where the Stain is actually a beautiful place. It's basically a river that is miles and miles wide and not very deep. And there's a nation state or whatever living in this river. And so they build on rocks in the river, or and their agriculture is basically with fruit trees, or I don't know, I'll think of things. With out on at least one side of the river, huge, immense cliffs over there. There's another one where there are giant trees. I know that's been done before, but I like giant trees. They're really cool. And so I have villages living up in the tops of these enormous trees. And so the next village over is that tree over there. And yeah, so I'll tell those stories at some point. And I have another story that I started based in essentially our world. It's going to be I don't want to give away too much, but essentially a middle school, I don't know if this qualifies as urban fantasy, but middle school teenage superhero story. It's not just like superhero out of science or whatever, but you'll see. And my concept there, I'm calling it in my head at least, wardrobe and what was his friend's name? I don't remember, but I wrote it down, so it'll be good. All right, so question 5, I think. What can we expect for the future? I'm splitting this up into writing, into podcast, I guess I already gave away a little bit of this. So for my writing, I do intend to write in multiple genres. And oh my goodness, I need to give some background for what I've been doing. Because, I mean, that's question 1. Where have you been? So, question 5/question 1 again. I have been doing a lot of lurking on a Facebook group called 20 Books for 50K. And the notion there is that, yeah, you can go and be an indie author or an independent author, self-published author. You can go and do that, and it is possible to make a living. But you're not going to do it off of one book, which is why, while I have Grendhill and I fully intend to tell this story and to tell it well, I'm going to take my time before calling it done and printing it on paper. So while I do have my Grendhill intellectual property, I have I've realized that I need to have other ideas, and I need to have more frequent products than I could possibly achieve with Grendhill. And so I'm intending for my wardrobe, urban fantasy superhero franchise to be a, what's the word? To be a series. And each series, like it's mid-grade fiction. So each book is probably going to be in the easy range, somewhere between 60,000 words. I'm guessing, but again, I've never actually finished writing a book. So maybe it will be shorter, maybe it will be longer. I do picture it being about that size range. Now, as far as like branching out, I mentioned that I want to write in multiple genres. So, lurking in this group, 20 Books to 50K, to explain the name, if it's not already obvious, the notion is that you can make 50K a year a notionally livable income. These days, that might be more difficult. You can make a livable income by publishing. You publish 20 books or more. You're not going to make it off of one book. You're not going to make it off of 2 or 5 books, most likely. Of course, by the time J.K. Rowling hit 5 books, she had big success. But I've learned a lot of things from this group. So they talk about not only like you have to keep producing. Obviously, you need to keep producing good work. You can't throw out trash and expect readers to come back again. But you keep producing, and you need to advertise somehow. People talk about that. People talk about advertising. They talk about Facebook ads, Amazon ads, and they talk about their success. And actually, so 20 Books to 50K does a conference, and I have signed up for the 20 Books Vegas in November of this year. So yeah, if you come, and hopefully I'll have something printed on paper that I can sign for you. But yeah, I'm going to go and rub shoulders with people and learn their tricks and hopefully speed things up. So what can we expect for the future? Like I said, I have a day job, and it keeps me pretty busy. Also, my 3 kids keep me pretty busy. The reason I was able to publish the podcast in the first place year before last, in 2020, it wasn't just because of the pandemic. That happened to coincide, but my day job had sent me to some training that was months long, and my family was not with me, so I had time on my hands in the evening like a lot of people do, whereas a lot of family people don't. So I had a little bit more time on my hands than I usually do, and I used it to cut some episodes for the Grendhill Chronicles podcast. I made some headway on writing the story during that time as well. And so looking to the future, I am planning a professional transition during this year. So we're planning a move. We're going to move house. We're going to move to an area where we previously lived, and we are... I'm going to be looking for a different kind of job, which I hope will afford me more time to think, and more time to produce. So, and I mean produce my novels, or maybe I'll branch into other formats. I would love to take my mid-grade fiction, like Wardrobe. I need to remember what his friend's name is going to be. Obviously not real names, because they're in middle school. But yeah, I would love to hire an artist and turn that into a graphic novel. Once I have some success with any stories, I would like to hire a translator and produce these works in different languages. I do speak Spanish myself, but I'm smart enough to know that I'm not a native speaker, and I would be looking for a professional translator, somebody. And people talk about this in 20 Books to 50K, where you want to find somebody who makes a living ideally translating that genre, not just that language. Yeah, so then there's audiobooks too. You can hire people to perform audiobooks, to produce audiobooks. You can either hire I don't remember what they call them, but basically a voice actor or a narrator. That's it. You can hire a narrator directly, or there are services that exist, and you pay the service and they take care of all of it. So you give them a manuscript, you pay them a fee, and I guess a few weeks maybe, but you give them sufficient time, maybe it's a few months, and they say, here's your audiobook. You put it on Audible or whatever other platforms. What else? So, that brings up, as far as doing an audiobook, I mean, that's hand in hand with no, it's not. That raises the question of the future of the podcast, though. So, I do have some episodes of the Grendhill Chronicles, and I would like to make sure it is all done well. So I might start over, but I don't think I should start over yet, because I need a good text. Not saying that what I have is bad, but I know it's not ironed yet. I need to iron it out. I need to work out the bugs, beta readers, proofreaders, and all that. The web novel format online is draft, is a draft form. But that reminds me of something something else I learned from the Facebook group. I don't remember what it's called. Some of you probably know what it's called. You're probably familiar with it. But there is a group, there is a website that exists and is well known for serialized fiction, especially fantasy and sci-fi. I have a tab open on my computer, so you know what? I'll look. Right, so it's called Royal Road. So the problem with Thorn.link, while it is a like it's my website. I can put whatever I want there. I'm paying for hosting out of my own pocket, and I could take it down completely if I wanted to. I could start just putting pictures of cats up there if I wanted to. I could open up a wiki, and we could argue about whether a taco is a sandwich. So Thorn.link is mine. I have control, and I like that. That's good. But the problem is that it's not well known. Basically, the people who know about it are the people who I have told about it. It's not recognized. So Royal Road is an existing, well-known platform for people to post serialized fiction. And I do intend to start sharing the Grendhill Chronicles on that platform. And hopefully that will let other people know about the story. And yeah. So speaking of Thorn.link, that brings me back to something else I have learned from 20 Books to 50K, is that if I'm branching out into other genres, there's a problem with that if you as a writer write a fantasy and a romance and nonfiction, whatever. If you as a writer publish in the rainbow of genres, and somebody reads your sci-fi and likes it, and they go looking for more of your work, and they find romance, and they're not in romance, they're in a sci-fi or fantasy. And so the name of the author is brand recognition, right? Or creates brand recognition. So if I'm publishing in multiple genres, I need multiple names to publish under. And I don't want to restrict myself to one genre or even two. And there are other authors out there who publish under multiple pseudonyms. They publish fantasy, they publish romance or whatever. And they do each genre under a different synonym. And it's not because they're trying to be sneaky. It's because they're trying to give readers what they expect. So keeping that in mind, I still want kind of my own identity to be in common. I want some way for somebody who likes the story about the middle school superhero to maybe find my other works, fantasy or sci-fi or whatever. And so that makes me think of a publishing house. Not necessarily an office. It'd be nice to have an office. It'd be nice to have an office out of the house. It is nice to have an office in the house, but my concern with an office in the house is because, as I said, I'm expecting a professional transition later this year, and I do hope to have more time to work on my creative endeavors. And while I do that, I hope that my children respect my home office that I have in the basement. So anyway, a publishing house. And I'm not saying necessarily an office that I go to work. It's down the street and turn the corner and on whatever road. But again, a brand identity. And I have chosen a name for this publishing house. I don't want to share it yet because I'm not fully committed. I'm pretty committed. But I'll wait. I'll wait and let it be a surprise. But yeah, a publishing house. A name that I can put blankety blank publishing on the back of my on the back of my books, or on the ISBN data page inside, and say, if you enjoyed this, try try works from our other authors, and I name my other pseudonyms. But not just me. I mean, my daughter loves the idea of writing herself as well. Like, she is writing her own story, talking about the adventures of her and her friend. And I think that's awesome. I think that's wonderful. And she has really fun ideas. So I am absolutely open to publishing her works later. So yeah, I mean, it's not just going to be me only. And if this ever became my profession, and if I got some renown and people knew my name, the publishing house wouldn't be closed. Like, I would be open to taking on other authors, or even expanding into music or whatever. I dream a little big. That's probably too big for myself, but we'll see. No harm in dreaming. Yeah, so I've talked about maybe a publishing house, maybe a few multiple genres, formats, podcast. Okay, so the podcast, I fully intend to continue the Grendhill Chronicles podcast. I fully intend to have that include both narrating the story and telling the making of. So the Grendhill Chronicles podcast won't go away. It may be modified somewhat, where I might even rename it. I think I want to keep the name the Grendhill Chronicles Podcast, because that's where I started. That's my home base. And so I fully intend to continue the Grendhill Chronicles Podcast. It will continue. It will tell the story of Grendhill, and it will give the making of. I hope to make it better. Now, in my dreamland, where I am able to turn this work into my profession, I dream of and I've talked with a couple of my friends, that once we are free from our current day jobs, maybe we'll have time to collaborate on this and do the Grendhill Chronicles, making the voices and making sound effects, making the background music. I have done some of that. Obviously, you've heard it before. But yeah, I mean, we'll see where it goes. With other stories, I don't know if other stories will turn into a podcast. We'll see. I mean, there's the Dad Bod Odd Pod from Dale Spalding, where he has read aloud multiple different stories. He's read a few short stories and at least one long form. I've been a little out of sync with his podcast for a while. I intend to get back into it and catch up with him. But yeah, the Dad Bod Odd Podcast covers multiple stories, and I think that's a great idea that I'm totally going to steal. Maybe. I've also, because I talk about these things at home sometimes, not infrequently, we've had ideas and we've had notions, and a couple of months ago, we were on a long drive to and from a weekend stay, and we had this idea for a children's podcast that we thought I still think is a really great idea. I don't want to talk about it because somebody could steal the idea, but I have the name of it on the screen in front of me. But yeah, we could do other podcasts, but it's a big drain on your time. Point taken from Sean Perrin's Clarinet podcast, and he didn't publish for 4 months, right? So it's a drain on the time, and I'm still learning how to make it go faster. Like, how to use Audacity. So I'm looking at my Audacity, recording my conversation right now, or my monologue. But I recently learned how to make Audacity remove dead time automatically. So I don't have to go through every multi-second pause and use the mouse to highlight the area and then delete that selected area manually. Nightmare. Yeah. So I used to think that you could only do that with Pro Tools or whatever other professional audio editing software, but you can do it with Audacity. And I also learned how to do something else with it that is important, but I don't remember what it was at this moment. I have so last iteration working on the podcast a year and a half ago, I would record and then I'd go into Audacity and I would see what I needed to do to make it sound good. Well, this time, before I jumped on the mic today, about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, but I got this microphone and I got my other microphone and I recorded multiple distances from the microphone. I recorded different recording levels, and then I took it into Audacity. Actually, I recorded it in Audacity, but then I went to go edit it and see what I could do to make it sound good, and I wrote that down. So you record it like this. In this case, I am about 3 inches away from my AKG Perception 120 USB microphone, and my record level in Audacity is 0.75. And then when I go to edit it, I know what I need to do to make it sound better in there. Yeah, so I hope to speed things up, and hopefully by speeding things up, I can make it possible to do other works. Maybe podcast based on the fiction, or maybe a non-fiction based podcast like we were thinking of for children. Of course, this podcast is always going to be child safe as far as language. I suppose it's possible we might discuss some themes that might be scary, or so I'm building my techniques, my standard techniques that I can use to streamline the process and make it faster and make the whole process more effective, so I don't have to think about how to edit the software, how to edit the audio. I just go and do it. And instead I can think about whether this character should go do that or go do that instead or whatever. And I think that's a pretty good update right now. I'm sorry that I don't have more plot to deliver at this time for the Grendhill Chronicles. It will come. I have done further world building in my mind. I've made a few notes here and there. But I think before I push hard on Grendhill, I'm going to push hard on Yavot, or Arbot. And I'm going to... I didn't tell you about that one, but you'll see. Yeah, so there's Arbot, and there's Wardrobe. That might not be the name in the end, but I'm going to push harder on these works so I can produce something and have it out there for public consumption, so that hopefully I can turn this into a profession and devote Grendhill the time that I think it deserves. I think it's very likely that several stories within the Grendhill universe will be published before the Grendhill Chronicles proper is published, because that doing these other stories within that universe will help me do the world building, and when it comes time to finish the Grendhill Chronicles, or to carry it out rather, it'll be simple work. My daughter's waking up. Maybe. Alright, well, until next time, thank you for listening to the Grendhill Chronicles Podcast. Make sure you subscribe, tell a friend, and I'll see you next time.